Okay. Hi, everyone. It's Emil Guillermo. It's good to see you all. Gotta turn on all the gizmos here. Oh, because I have a few gizmos here. Anyway, how are you? It's did you bring the tofu salad? Like I said, it's like a top salad except only more tofu than meat, and and it's vegan. Anyway, it's good to see you all. You know, we do these pop-ups every weekend because the museum is still closed. I mean, you know that, right? We're still closed at the museum, and it's because we still love you, but we're closed. I know it doesn't make sense, huh? How can you still be closed? You say. Well, it's easy, and I know that we've been talking about not being closed, but we took a sample of all the people who were volunteers, and we sort of looked at what was happening. We looked at what was happening in the community, what was happening throughout the country, and we just felt that we couldn't open up safely for you and us, the volunteers. I mean, we're an all volunteerization, and so if you didn't go to the FANHS Facebook page yet, the FANHS Museum, FANHS Museum, right, the Filipino American National Historical Society Museum page. Yet I wrote a little letter, and I shall read it to you. I said, a note from your FANHS Museum director. Dear supporters of the FANHS Museum, as you know, the museum has been closed since the middle of March when the pandemic hit. And we've been patiently waiting for things to get better. We've even been given the go ahead to open if we can do so safely. Unfortunately, after weeks of figuring out how to do that, the pandemic seems to be worsening in our country, throughout the country. And if you look at the map, it's pretty scary. It's all red, coronavirus wise, that is. I mean, it's scary, right? And so, because of that, the museum board has decided to keep the museum closed until further notice out of an overabundance of caution. Now, our most important consideration is to make your next visit to to East Weber Avenue in Stockton, 337, right? That's where we are, 337 East Weber in Stockton. Well, that's where the museum is. We want to make your next visit and our volunteers as safe as possible. So our board felt the risk was just too great to put our guard down now, just sort of like, you know, a boxer. Now, if you know, holding this up, this is a right-handed stance. This is not Manny Pacquiao would be left-handed stance, but since Manny Pacquiao has those homophobic type of, we're right-handed stance. We don't want to put our guard down. That's the point, right? We will wait a little longer until we see a significant drop in cases around our state, around our area, and throughout the country. But we're staying busy. Recently, I spoke to the Delta Heritage Forum in Sacramento about the museum, and I learned what other heritage areas, the Delta Heritage area is kind of interesting. I mean, you might have seen the UNESCO heritage sites throughout around the country, around the world, rather. You know, and then they designate them as heritage sites, and people visit them, and they have like park ranger types telling you about them, the historical value of that site. Well, the heritage program in the United States is kind of like the National Park Service, only maybe it's another tier below, and they call these heritage sites. And the Delta from Sacramento to Stockton was included as a protected area. Now, It's not like a traditional boundary. In fact, they said, we apologize, Emil, we Stockton wasn't included, which, you think to yourself, Stockton not included, the biggest port city in the Delta. I mean, but if you're including Sacramento, then we're not bigger than Sacramento. But still, no Stockton, but you include Lathrop and Manteca's in there too, and Vallejo. Ooh, there's some serious rectification needed there. Anyway, they were nice. They said they're going to try to include Stockton, the city, but the Delta Heritage Forum took place in Sacramento virtually. We talked about the museum, or I did, and we heard about how other museums are dealing with the pandemic and how other museums talk about things like interpretation and storytelling, all the kind of things that we're doing at the museum. So I did that last week. We also expanded our digital efforts to make the Filipino American story accessible online. We have these live Facebook virtual pop-ups. They remain popular, and I hope you enjoy them. Hey, they tell me if you're using Facebook, you ought to do this. Put down like in the chat box, or put down or on the Facebook page if you're on the FANHS Museum Facebook page. Make sure you put down a like wherever. Put down multiple likes. Just like the page, and also engage in the chat. Say hi, Emil. I like your lighting. You can say that if you want. I mean, or you can say, Emil, you look too white. I don't like your lighting. You could say that too, and I won't be sad by that. But you can chat, engage with us, and so we're doing all these things to expand our digital efforts to make the Filipino American story accessible online. Now, we got these pop-ups. We talk about subjects like the Filipino veterans of World War II. You might have seen the new edition down there. They call to, let's see, what was it called? It's called the Duty to Country. Call to Duty is the name of the video game. No, we're not talking about that, but a similar kind of thing. I mean, Duty to Country Under One Flag is the name of the program. I went to that last week on behalf of the museum, and the Fil-Am vets folks, led by Tony Taguba, General Tony Taguba, close personal friend. We have worked together. I know General Taguba, and he sent me a note saying, "Hey, what are you doing? Go to this thing." Yes, sir. I'm gonna go. So again, when General Taguba asks you by email, you got to go. Do I have to wear a uniform? What kind of uniform you got, Emil? Well, I got this purple thing I'm wearing. Okay. Anyway, so I went to this thing last week. It was a fun time. And if you didn't go there, if you didn't go to the meeting, it was an online meeting. Click on the link that I posted on the FANHS Museum page and see what General Taguba, the general, what he's cooking up with my other good friend John Milagrito and the Fil-Am vets. It's interesting. It's a learning thing, and I think it'll be an example of what can be done digitally to tell the Filipino American story. Okay. So check that out. Click on that. Not now. Stay with me now. I got to finish this letter and some other things. But stay with me, okay? And if you're just joining us now, I jumped the gun. I started a little early, but you'll forgive me because you can go back and see the rest of it. I'm talking about this letter that explains why we're closed. Still, out of an overabundance of caution, and considering that many of us are older and a lot of people who are into Filipino American history right now are younger, it's kind of a bad mix when, younger people are out and about, older people are staying in, they meet together and hello, Mr. Virus. Hello, Mrs. Virus. Hey, I didn't see you here. Well, I'm asymptomatic. Oh, okay. Uh, it's just not the safe thing considering that red map that they keep showing. That's the coronavirus and not the political map. So we're closed, but we're doing all these things on your behalf. Click on that thing on the Filipino vets of World War II. Okay. We've also done interviews with other FANHS Museum affiliates, chapters, and people in the know, like Alex Idilior. Alex is a great resource. Go to the FANHS, FANHS Museum, or go to Facebook at FANHS Museum /live and see all our videos. Just say, hey, heck with Netflix. I'm not into football this week. I'm gonna like watch all the videos that Emil has done and all that we've done through at the museum. I watch, I watched the interview I did with Joey Tobacco. Man, that's it. New York. The New York story is interesting, and Joey out there in Queens, very interesting guy. I salute you, New York chapter, FANHS, Joey Tobacco. That story. If you haven't heard Joey talks like a New Yorker. No, that's Boston. Okay, we don't have a Boston chapter yet, but Joey, good, good. Alex Idilier talking about Larry Itling and the Grape Strike, good. And then me talking about the first Filipinos of 1587 and my interview with Eloisa Bora. Find out about 1587 and the significance of 1587. And all the people are trying to say, no, 1587, that's not the story, or it is the story. Or find out the controversy. Okay, we also had a successful, last weekend, we had a successful Filipino American History Month finale, which was the webinar discussion on the Saline Archive, a Central Valley Delta story, a new documentary on the family of a Filipino American buried alive in 1932 in California. 1932. Why is that significant, Emil? Well, you got to go see the webinar. It's interesting. But if you think about how many Filipina stories there are, I mean, the 20s and 30s, we focus on the Manongs because, well, there were more Manongs. 14-1 was the ratio. But what is the flip side of that 14-1 ratio? Not that many men, more men than women. What we know about the men's stories, right? They were in the fields. How about the women? What stories have you heard about the women? And in many ways, the Celine story shows a Filipino hero or a heroine, I guess, huh? Right? She's a Filipino heroine who was sadly, because she spoke up and testified against certain people, she was buried alive. Check out that webinar. It's on our FANHS Museum. Go to facebook.com/FANHS Museum/live. Check it out there, or check it out on our FANHS Museum YouTube channel. So please let me know what other topics you'd like to explore. You can contact me at, now I got a bunch of emails. If you want to contact me directly, send it to me at emilamok, at gmail.com. That'll get to me, not to my spam folder. You can also just leave a message on the museum chat, and we can trade messages on Facebook. As you can see, despite being closed, we are dedicated to engaging with you on the Filipino American story. So please visit us online right here. Tell your friends here on Facebook, on our Facebook page at FANHS Museum. And remember, we're an all volunteer organization. I mean, really, totally all volunteer. Consider helping us grow by joining our team. Join us. Make a donation. Come and volunteer. If we have a younger subset of volunteers with our older subset of volunteers, then we can say, oh, well, we don't have to sacrifice the older folks. We can get the younger folks out there, being docents at the museum and doing things at the museum. But it's sad to say that sometimes it does feel like the Filipino Alamo, where there's just like a handful of us out there with the gong. I got to count on the gong. Gong, are you there behind me? Got my back? Um, it's definitely consider joining the team. And if you have a talent like, say, computers, whatever, yeah, contact us, please. Or make a donation on our website at fansmuseum.com/membership or by clicking on the donate button at the bottom of the page. Okay. So once again, thank you for your continued support. I'll see you on Facebook. This is what I say on the letter. I'm seeing it right now. I mean, you're getting the truth. But that's what I said. If you got the letter, you got the email. If you want the email, get on our email list. Just put it in the chat box, and we'll make sure that you are informed. Okay. In the meantime, please stay safe and healthy. And so that's the message today, or one of the messages today. And the reason why we're not open, we'd like to be open. Once again, we just are. Anyway, I promised we would do this week in Filipino American history, and looking at the FANHS calendar, reading from the FANHS calendar, this week in Filipino American history. Well, what happened this week? Something that has to do with counting, I think. No. Well, look, here's some things that I think you need to know about. November 8th. Okay. We're not there yet. It's not the 8th yet. Today, is it? No. Oh, today. Today's the 8th. Anti-Filipino riot in Washington. Is that Wapato? Wapato, Washington, 1927. It's significant to know just how widespread the anti-Filipino sentiment was. Most of the Filipinos came from, around the Ilocos. Yeah, they usually left the Ilocos, went to Hawaii first, 1906 through maybe 1910, 1918, and then they went from Hawaii to San Francisco and then on to Stockton, and then they went up to Washington. They migrated with the crops, or they came from, I say, Ilocos, but they could have come from Cebu, as many of you know, anywhere in the Philippines, right? But the fact that they got to San Francisco, or they got to Seattle, or they got to LA on those dollar ship, steam lines, they had to find jobs. They had to go find work. That's why they didn't stay in San Francisco. They went to Stockton, where the fields were, and Stockton became the hub. Stockton really essentially became the cradle of Filipino American history. And from there, people migrated, or families, or most of them didn't have families. The families who were anchored in Stockton, they were lucky. Many did not have families. There were these bachelors, the workforce. Remember, 14-1 men to women, and there were in 1930 there were 40,000 Filipinos, according to the census. I hope you filled out your census this year. 40,000 Filipinos. Now, where do they go? Most of them were in California, but a lot of them were migrants, and a lot of them went north to Washington, on their way to Alaska to go do the canneries. And anti-Filipino sentiment, November 8th, 1927, in Washington State. It's important to put it into context. It didn't just happen in California. It didn't just happen in Salinas or Watsonville or Stockton or the Central Valley or every place where Filipinos were. It happened, really. If there was a Filipino, there was anti-Filipino sentiment, and it usually came from whites to Filipinos. a bit of Filipino history this week in Filipino history, November 8th, 1927 in Washington State. Uh, the other thing that happened, oh, yeah, there was something that happened on November 3rd. Maybe it was something about counting a meal. No. November 3rd, Pensionados, or U.S. government-sponsored Filipino students begin arriving at universities and colleges in the United States. Several studied at the College of Pacific, right there in Stockton, right? And many came from the University of, it's now known as the University of Pacific, but it was in Stockton in the 1910s. Here's the thing to understand about the pensionados. In 1906, the Filipinos started coming to the United States, mostly as workers. But if you were of a class, upper class, educated class, the bureaucratic class, the political class, if you were people of means in the Philippines in 1906, and there were some, from the Spanish days, before the United States imperialized or colonized the Philippines. There were upper classes, they had the means, they sent sons and daughters, family members as pensionados to America to study at these elite universities. And you know as well as I, this is the funny thing about Filipinos. We value education and we value elite education. Excuse me. And you know that because of that, boy, you go to UC Berkeley, you go to UCLA, you go to Stanford, it's a big deal in the family. It's a big, big deal. So put yourself back in 1910, 1915, 1918. You're able to study, able to leave Manila or the Philippines, Cebu, Luwag as a pensionado. Generally, they probably were closer to Manila than not. They come over to America. They enroll in an elite private university. That's the beginning of Filipinos in America for some, right? Filipinos with means. That was one way you got here as a pensionado. But I know that my dad, while men and women studied in the Philippines under this very, very traditional American English system, most were, some were scholars. That's how they learned English. But when they came over as, I'm looking for opportunity. I got my Macintosh suit. I got my one suit. Got my bags. One bag on the steamship. Looking for opportunity. Streets are lined with gold. My father came in 1928, just in time for the Depression. That's the story. So this week in Filipino history, November 3rd, 1910, 1915, 1920, the pensionados started arriving to elite colleges. And so when you see the pride that Filipinos have ongoing about education, boy, your kid gets a scholarship, they go to an elite university, they beam. It's a big deal, right? Go to Stanford, go to Cal, go to UCLA. Big deal. It's a big deal. And remember, the first were the pensionados. They were a big deal back in the Philippines. All right, so we got this week in Filipino history out of the way. We got we mentioned the letter why we're still closed. This week in Filipino history, I want to mention this other thing because it was a big deal. I mean, it happened in America. Did you see yesterday? I did a pop up with with San Francisco State College of Ethnic Studies, Filipino American History professor, Asian American Studies professor, Daniel Phil Gonzalez. He's like a go-to guy. He's professor emeritus, still teaches in the spring, but I just love the fact that he is such an esteemed professor who has this fount of knowledge. Well, you see our videos. He knows a lot, and he'll say it. He'll talk. No, love Dan, but really, we both he and I have these conversations about politics. Views expressed are our own, and it's important that Filipino Americans are able to talk freely and openly about politics and about their lives and about their lives in the context of the things that are happening now. And, uh, you know, this year, Filipinos were the most enthusiastic of among all Asian American groups, according to the National Asian American Voter Survey. The Filipinos were like through the roof. They were into Filipinos were into this thing called the election of 2020. So this is going to be historic. It's an historic response from a community that has always been silent. And if you're a community that's always been silent, and this is the year that you're 61% enthused more than any other Asian American group, by golly, it's an historical moment. Whether or not your guy won, now that's another thing. We're nonpartisan. We just say go and vote, for whomever. But it was kind of historic yesterday, don't you think? Yeah, yesterday being Saturday, when all of a sudden, we go from election day to an election week, and oh my God, are we going to be finished counting? Because I know you voted, but when you vote, don't you think, oh my God, this is intricate? I mean, I can like order something on, through an app, or I can get a ride on a, oh, we don't want to do that. We can order, well, if you Prop 22 is kind of, although look, my point is technology has enabled everything. And yet here we are marking ballots. And it's like, oh my God, someone's going to count that. Well, certainly machines are going to count that. And then, of course, there was this controversy about, or conspiracy about Sharpies. Oh, I don't have my Sharpie with me. But this idea that, oh, Sharpies will damage the reader or won't read your vote. And people got alarmed. I mean, it was a good concern. Anyway, Sharpies did not hurt. But, this voting thing, huge thing, huge deal. We started counting on we voted on Tuesday. Actually, we voted before. I voted October 14th. That's how concerned. I wanted to vote right away. I wanted to vote during Filipino American History Month. I just felt lucky that way. I voted, and just waiting for everyone else to vote. The president seemed to want to badmouth early voting and mail-in voting, and suggested people show up. And the studies were showing that, oh well, because of that and other reasons, Republicans tended to vote same day. People, who in California, Asian Americans especially, were mail-in voters, and they wanted to vote early. I was a mail-in voter, but I wanted to make sure that my vote counted. So I went October 14th. As soon as the county voter registrar's office was open, I went there. It was fun. I enjoy doing it, marking the ballots, but I keep wondering, boy, counting is going to be, I hope it gets counted. Even as I handed my ballot to the woman at the desk. And wouldn't you know, Tuesday night, November 3rd, the counting day, it was not a nightmare, but it was a nail biter. Like, what's going to happen? We don't know what's going to happen. I learned so much about mapology, red states, blue states, and, the electoral college, who's going to get to 270, and it was clear pretty much what was going to happen. That someone had to win at least 2 out of 3 of the blue wall, the so-called blue wall, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, 2 or 3. That's all they needed. And then hopefully, if it was the Democrats, they had to win the blue wall. If they won the blue wall and one red state, being Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, and Nevada, one red state and the blue wall, and the Democrats win. Hold all the red states and win 2 or 3 of the blue wall, and the Republicans win. So it was fairly easy to say, okay, we're waiting to see which is going to get us, which is going to enable us to get to bed soon, the first night. And when everyone was hoping that it was going to be Florida, Florida did not go. It looked like maybe it would turn blue, but, and this is a kind of a Filipino thing. They kept saying, maybe they'll flip Florida. No, they did not flip Florida. Florida stayed red, and we had to stay up, which seems like forever. But, and we just wait for, like I said, the red state, blue state phenomenon to happen for either the Democrats or the Republicans. Whoever was able to meet that formula of getting to 270, and all you had to do is look at Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and those 5 red states that I talked about, the so-called battlegrounds, and you got a winner from whatever side. Notice how, God, California. Did anyone talk about California? And most of us live in California. The majority of Filipinos live in California. Most of Asian Americans live in California. They didn't talk about us at all. It was all just those 5 battleground states. Nevada was the closest in terms of where do all the Filipinos live among those states that I mentioned. Nevada. And it really didn't come into play until late. But what was interesting about Tuesday was there was President Trump, 2:30 in the morning Eastern time, and I guess it was around 11:30 at night, West Coast time, because it wasn't that late yet. I was staying up. I was saying I was going to go to bed after Biden talked. It wasn't clear that Trump was going to say anything, but he pops up 11:30, and I start watching, and he says, "I already won." He said, "I already won," practically dictating the vote. And what did that remind me of? It reminded me of Ferdinand Marcos. Marcos was the one who held those snap elections that people would wonder, well, are they real? Maybe it wasn't as bad as Saddam Hussein. Remember Saddam Hussein? He had an election once where he had 11 million positives and 0 negative votes. Boy, the power of dictatorship. Well, Trump's not a dictator. He's not. He has authoritarian tendencies, but he's not a dictator. But there he was saying that night, election night, oh, I already won, or stop the count. This is a fraud on the United States. It's embarrassment. It was slightly offensive, I think, if you are a true patriot, a true American, regardless of who you voted for, red or blue. You have to say, what is the president, the leader of the free world, doing saying this stuff about our democracy? And so I hope it kind of hit a nerve among you Filipinos who love to vote. This is the thing. When my father came over from the Philippines, his big thing was, I'm here. He wanted his democracy direct. He wanted to vote. So that happened Tuesday. We all went to sleep. Wednesday, we're trying to figure out, well, what's going to happen? Are we going to get something going on with Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania? We know Florida's gone. All right, so that the red wall is happening there. I was thinking Georgia, forget Georgia, that's going to go red. Forget South Carolina, forget Arizona. I was thinking, well, I wasn't sure who was going to win. I was thinking, well, maybe the Reds will have it. Well, as it was, Wednesday, they gave Wisconsin to Biden, and then Michigan goes to Biden ultimately. And then it was like he won 2 of 3 of the blue states. He had to win 1 red to win. Biden did. And Trump, he had to keep all his red states intact and win 1 blue state. Pennsylvania. So Thursday, we went to bed not knowing what was going to happen, but the trends were coming in. In Pennsylvania, the huge lead that Trump had was shrinking. And Pennsylvania was going to, it seems like the trend was going to Biden. And it was going that way because, first in, first out. I mean, you business types out there, you accountant types, you know what FIFO, LIFO, last in, first out. In voting, it was, same day votes get counted first. And then afterwards, they count all the other ballots. Oh, Pennsylvania starts looking like, oh, it was red and now it's slightly purple. Now it's like blue. What's going to happen to Pennsylvania? Meanwhile, down south, Georgia starts going, well, it was red because all the Republicans voted first, and now they're counting all the other ballots, the mail-in ballots. And oh my God, Georgia. I know Georgia. My daughter used to live there. I used to go there not all the time, but I paid attention to Georgia. I've been to Georgia. And not necessarily Atlanta. I mean, you get to the Atlanta airport and then you go to the place where you got to go, and it's like a 3-hour drive, and it's like, Georgia. When you're buying peanuts from Jimmy Carter's peanut farm, Georgia. Georgia was turning blue. That was on Friday. And then it was just a matter of like, we just got to see what happens. And then, Georgia's turning blue. And then what happens to Arizona? First people were talking about Arizona. If Biden won Arizona, there it goes. That's the puncture in the red wall. Trump can't win. I mean, Arizona was like, we don't know. We got to see what's happening in Phoenix. We got to see what's happening in Maricopa County. Look at those guys with the long guns. That's threatening. Wait a minute. We're just counting votes. Meantime, President Trump is talking about, I'm going to sue everyone. I'm going to, for what? I don't know. We don't know if he has a case. He doesn't show any evidence. So all that happened. Then Saturday comes up, Saturday morning. Maybe we'll find out about Pennsylvania, because if the word was, if Biden wins Pennsylvania, boom, he wins. And then they announced Pennsylvania for Biden, and the country erupted. I mean, not in my small rural town, no. We're so polite, we don't even put up signs on our lawns because we don't want to offend our neighbors to the left or to the right. Not politically, just our neighbors to the left and to the right. So, what a morning. I mean, as soon as that happened, none of the media companies wanted to call the election because they were, I mean, who knew anything this year? You waited until you were absolutely certain that there could be no possible comeback. And there was no possible comeback if all the votes were counted in Pennsylvania and the blue wall was now suddenly all Biden. And there was this puncture in Georgia. Well, actually, forget Georgia. If Biden won all 3 of the blue battleground states, there was no way to 270 electoral college votes. And that's what happened. There was just no way. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris. Joe Biden, president-elect, Kamala Harris, vice president-elect. And that was it. And Donald Trump had tweeted that morning, "I've won the election already." His tweet, "I won the election already by a lot." That was, I believe, his direct tweet. And then he went to play golf. And when he came back, his presidency had an expiration date. So this is where we are. And if you saw yesterday on television, people on the streets in New York, in Oakland, in Washington D.C., in L.A. And here's the Filipino part. It reminded me of Filipino people power. People power in the Philippines when Marcos fell. I mean, that's. I mean, have people asked me, "Have you ever seen this before, Emil?" I said, "Well, when I went to the Philippines in 1983, reporting for the NBC affiliate in San Francisco to cover the assassination of Benigno Aquino and his procession along the streets of Manila, I'd never seen 1,000,000 people in one place, just marching behind the casket of Aquino. You can look it up online. Look at the pictures of 1,000,000 people, at least 1,000,000 people. It had to be. I just had never seen anything like that. And then, of course, subsequent to that, now we have Million Man marches and women's marches. Those kind of things have now become kind of staple examples of human protest, right? And they're really amazing. And so they show these shots of people in Washington and New York, and it's not 1,000,000 people, but it's a few thousand, however many it is. The exuberance is exponential, and it just, I just couldn't see, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This was people power in America through the power of the vote and counting all the votes. That's what it was. It was just an amazing thing to see. I didn't witness it live. I mean, because of COVID, I'm in my closet here. Filipino in the closet. Yeah, with my gong. And I'm watching this and I'm thinking, wow, this is a moment. America is mimicking the same kind of people power that saw the Philippines change hands in 1987. And my God, it's, you realize this is history. This is history. The first South Asian, Indian American, Asian American vice president, woman, right? The highest ranking woman, highest ranking Asian American in our government, Kamala Harris, who's from Oakland. She now ascends and is an example to all people who clamor for inclusion, not just the little girls, not just the women, but everyone, who felt left out, who have felt not included. Kamala Harris, our senator, former state attorney general, Kamala Harris. What a political career, right? And I knew her when she was just a San Francisco district attorney. And so Kamala Harris, she's up, and Joe Biden, for as much as, I mean, Joe Biden, a lot of people just only know him from his days as vice president to Obama, right? But for those of us who've been following politics for a long time, and Biden was seen as, well, I guess he can't be seen as a great white hope when, they're all white in American politics. But he was seen as an up and comer, a young guy who was destined for great things. But he had a number of screw ups along the way. It shows you that, when if at first you don't succeed, try again. Because ultimately you'll get there. You may be 78 years old, but you'll get there. The long tail and the long arc of a political life. You'll lose, you'll lose, you'll lose, you'll lose, you'll lose, and then you win. And you can sneak in some little wins in there, but kind of a motivational thing, if you understand it, that, my God, you can lose and you can win a little bit, but you can lose. He ran for president twice before. And then a lot of people thought he was sunk after those Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas, exchanges. Judge Clarence Thomas accused of harassment, sexual harassment by Professor Anita Hill. They're big hearings. This was in the 90s. It did not turn out well for Anita Hill, and a lot of people blamed Joe Biden. And so Joe Biden sort of like slunk back, national ambition, back to his home base where everyone loved him in Delaware. And it wasn't until Obama tapped him that he was able to find redemption. But, for Biden, you have to say this. When he screwed up, he's always come back and said, hey, look, I'm sorry. I've learned. And he moved on. So the big thing yesterday on Saturday, after seeing the Filipino-ness of all the Americans, all the people here in the United States just flocking the streets. Hey, there were 74 million people who voted for Joe Biden. They were happy. But there were 70 million, or Trump said 71 million. He tweeted it out yesterday. He said, hey, 71 million people voted for me. Yeah, but you lost. Yeah, but 71 million people voted for me. Yeah, but you lost. But the point is, 71 million people aren't so happy today. And this is where you have to give some credit to Joe Biden. Because yesterday, if you saw his speech yesterday night, about 5:45, 6 o'clock Pacific time, he said what he was going to do. He did what he said he was going to do. He said he wanted to be president for all Americans. He said he wanted to represent the people who didn't vote for him. He said he wanted to be there for us all, to be what I call the all-American president, which, hey, if you saw the Clemson Notre Dame game, college football. No, he was the all-American president yesterday. And I guess the line that people are coming away with, they're saying, end this grim era of demonization. Demonization, that's where, when I first encountered the phrase demonizing, it had to do with, remember Saddam Hussein during the Gulf War? And people were demonized, oh, he's bad, he's bad. People demonized him, and that was an easy way to get people to hate Iraq. It was an easy way to get people to hate Saddam Hussein. And it was an easy way to get people to say, yeah, let's do this push button war. Let's take them out. And they did. But it didn't take long for that to become the standard strategy in our domestic politics. And by 2016, it enhanced Trump's bullying, non-empathetic style. And we've lived through that these last 4 years. Now, for Biden is the antithesis of all that. And yesterday it really showed when he said, this is what he said. He said, special thanks for the entire nation. I'm proud of the coalition we put together, the broadest and most diverse coalition in history. Democrats, Republicans, independents, progressives, moderates, conservatives, young, old, urban, suburban, rural, gay, straight, transgender, white, Latino, Asian. And, when you hear Asian, you got to hear, oh, he means Filipinos, Native American. And then he gave that special shout out to the Black community. He said, when this campaign was at its lowest ebb, the African American community stood up again for me, Biden said. And everyone was honking because he was in a parking lot and they're cheering. And then he reached out to those non-supporters, to the 71 million who didn't vote for him. He said, It was time to listen to each other again, stop treating opponents as our enemies. He said, they're Americans. And then he turned to a biblical phrase, Ecclesiastes, time for, there is a season. This is a time for healing in America. Quote, I will work as hard for those who didn't vote for me as those who did. Let this grim era of demonization in America begin to end here and now. Joe Biden. That's Joe Biden. Good Catholic. He even quoted that, he called it a hymn. I guess it's a hymn, although it's more song, right? Eagles Wing, the Eagles Wing song. You know it. I haven't been to mass since the pandemic, but yeah. They're playing the Eagles Wing song. You know it. All you good Catholics know that. He quoted from that. So it was just a feel good. I mean, Joe Biden is kind of the right president for this time, right after this polarizing Trump, this non-empathetic, polarizing Trump. You can say, oh, well, he's a good businessman, Emil. Well, okay, for business, it's fine, profits first, but government, you got to put people first, because if you don't put people first in government, you end up with 230 million or 230,000 Americans dead from the coronavirus. So I just think that we all should come together, whether you were red or blue, you voted for the guy, didn't vote for the guy. Here's an earnest attempt by Biden to try to be the president for everyone. And the way Filipino Americans should look at it, look, if you were one of the 61% who were exuberant about this election, then take your exuberance, your historically high Filipino American exuberance, and continue to be exuberant. Continue to go out there and get involved and be political and run for office or support a candidate or support a local official or do something for your community. Here's the historical takeaway for Filipino Americans. We have long been silent, too long. And this year, for some reason, we exploded historically. The Filipino Americans exploded and took sides and said, I'm for blue or I'm for red. And now at the end, we need to all come together because, as Biden said yesterday, we're all Americans. We're all in this country together and we can work together. Now, that would be an historical thing. That would be a great thing. And to have our voices heard and to be a force, a Filipino American force, that would be historic. Now, I want you to know how important this is, this idea of a presidency and what happens and what we do. I mean, think back in 1941. Think back when FDR said to your forebears, your ancestors back in the Philippines, when the late Don Mabalan, right, was her father, Ernie, was in the Philippines. Ernie Mabalan, the late Ernie Mabalan, good Stockton guy. When he heard FDR say, hey, fight with us, fight side by side Americans. Now let's win this war. I mean, that's what Ernie did. Ernie was a guerrilla fighter. I mean, later on, he came to America and he also joined, I believe he joined the regular U.S. forces, but he was a member of the USA FFE. And we relied on President Roosevelt. We relied on what he had to say. And then when Roosevelt left, 1946, and there was Harry Truman, how did we feel when Harry Truman passed the Rescission Act that went back on all those promises that were made to the Filipinos? That's the importance of the presidency, and that's the importance of your voice and your vote. Historically, we know it, we can see it. Don't forget it. That's maybe the prime example. But let's look going forward. Let's look what can happen going forward. We've got this coronavirus fight. We all got to pitch in. It's like the invisible war. We got to pitch in and we got to do what we can. We got to mask up. We got to not necessarily lock down, but be careful. That's one thing yesterday. No one had time or no one thought about well, they masked up, but no one thought about social distancing much. There was just this exuberance to get out there, and who can blame them? Like I said, there are some people today, 74 million, who are very, very happy, 71 million who are very, very sad. Well, maybe not very, very, but think of it this way. There should be 150 million who are together because there is a new leader who wants to lead us all. And that can be historic. And where Filipinos are, going forward, well, use that enthusiasm that you got this election cycle and stay open to civic engagement. Be an historical Filipino who, for a change, is choosing to speak out and to be public, to take a stand, and to work in a civic way for your family, for your friends, for your community. Not just the Filipinos, but for all of us. Wherever you are, California, New York, Texas, Washington, Oregon, the United States. We are united again, or can be, not divided. We're not just a state of being, we're united again. So that's what happened on Saturday. And now here it is, Sunday. And God, the 49ers aren't playing. I don't really care about them anymore. Football. No, and my wife watches Masterpiece Theater, so that's a big deal for her. No, me, I just look forward to speaking to you and just talking to you in these little chats because it's socially distanced. I don't have to wear gloves. We don't have to mask up. You get to see me. I get to see you. And let's see, briefly, let's see if there's anything in the chat box. Because if there is, I mean, I can engage in conversation with anyone in the chat box. Let's see. In the late 1930s, this is a John. Let's see. Oh, here's one comment from John Lives Erlinda. Hi, John. You love her? I like Erlinda. I don't know her, but I'm sure I would love her in not the same way you would, but in the late 1930s to when the Philippines got its independence, my dad and aunts and uncle all came to the U.S. because their mother wanted them to come here. See? Now that's important. Now here's the thing about the late 1930s. The late 1930s, if you follow the history, in the 1934, the Tidings-McDuffie Act said, hey, Filipinos, you are no longer American nationals, and you cannot just come over. In fact, the Filipinos after 1934 had to go to Angel Island. They had to go to Angel Island and get checked out before they were allowed in, or they were sent back. Because in the meantime, the Filipinos who were here before had to, well, they didn't have to, it was voluntary, but repatriation was the way. So 1934. But still, that's a great story that John has shared with us, because this is the thing about our country. And we talk about American history, and I think it's kind of neat that some things that happened in Filipino history, like the people power thing, we saw a glimpse of it yesterday when all these people went out in the streets. If you can't understand what that feeling was, think back to the 80s when Marcos was toppled, when the dictator was toppled, and the relief that people felt when that happened. It was similar. Now, I'm not saying that Trump was a dictator. Definitely an authoritarian. Not saying he was a dictator, but oh my God, the release and the relief that was felt, pretty amazing, I'd say, on Saturday. So it's a little bit of Filipino history imposed on American history for a change. Where the Americans impose things on the Filipinos. This is something, and something worth noting. Anyway, big day on Saturday, and who knows what's going to come. What's going to come in the next week, because we have lawsuits. We have a Supreme Court that may or may not be able to rule on whatever it is that legal case is coming down the pike. I think, though, that if I were Trump, I think the best thing to do would be to look at what happened yesterday out in the streets. Look at how Americans responded, and for the good of the country, say, I did what I did. I gave the rich people, some decent tax cuts. I gave some decent tax cuts to the middle class, not as much as to the 1%, but we cut our taxes. And because we cut our taxes, we have a $3.1 trillion deficit. We can deal with that. Families know what it's like to carry bank balances or credit card balances. When you're the government, 3.1 trillion. That doesn't sound very conservative to me, though. Anyway, but look what Trump did. He made friends with Kim Jong-un, and when you make friends with Putin, your enemies. That's got to be good. They're going to be friends. Okay, so let's look at other things that Trump did. He enriched his family. Well, guys got to eat. Let's see, what else did he do? He sort of built the wall. Maybe it's good he didn't. Maybe it's good he didn't build the wall. He talked about building a wall, and he only sort of did it halfway. So, positive. He didn't complete the wall. He took babies from mothers at the border. Okay, we'll put that in a separate category. He kept the ice buckets filled for all that. Oh, he doesn't drink, but for, maybe Melania wants some late night champagne or something. Okay, well, I'm sure some people, maybe you could put down in chat that, he did something. I'm sure he did something. I'm almost positive he did something. We know he did something. And that's why everyone was out in the streets on Saturday like it was the American version of people power. But now that's a big takeaway. People power is the vote. People power is the American voice, the vote. Do not, do not underestimate the power of that vote. Okay. It's something. Okay. We're going to wrap this up. I want to remind you again why we're closed. Check out the FANHS Museum Facebook page and see why. The board got together and felt that it was just not right with the rising number of cases and the number of volunteers we had. We want it to be safe for everyone. So we're going to continue doing these check-ins. Check in with us, like our Facebook page, engage and chat. Leave your questions underneath the chat. I'll answer them. And check out this new post that I put in yesterday. Under One Flag, Duty to Country Education Project of the Filipino American Veterans of World War II. It's a great project. You can see what they launched it yesterday. I'm going to find out what it means exactly and how we at the museum can take part and share some of these items with you, our museum goers. And it's another digital project that we can do. A reminder also to check out the virtual pop-up that we did, the webinar of the Celine Archive documentary. So a lot's happening. We got a full week ahead. Veterans Day is coming up. We remember our vets. And another good reason to check out the Duty to Country release that I posted on the Facebook page, because it'll just get you in the mood for thinking about our vets, what our vets did. And I'll be back next week and I'll talk a little about our veterans. So very important. One of our veterans is a volunteer. I'm talking about Chris Castro, and you can check out what he put down on our Facebook page. He's got a picture of his mother and his family. He's a proud Air Force vet, a great volunteer. Check out his fundraiser. It's a way that you can contribute to the FANHS Museum. Okay, and with that, we are going to say goodbye. You can check out all my other works at amok.com, but check out the museum stuff. Check out the videos if you have time today. I thank you for your time right now. If you missed any part of this, go to the beginning, check out the, I think it'll post momentarily, and you can see the recording. And check out all the recordings on the Facebook Live page of the museum. And it's at fanhsmuseum.com/live. I just want to just say one last thing about the historic nature of this weekend. And even if you didn't vote, if you're one of those who voted for the guy who won, we are at a unique moment than we've been in the last 4 years. We got now a president who wants to be a president for everyone. The 74 million who voted for him and the 71 million who didn't. So we're all one America, and that's should give us all a good feeling. I'm your Filipino American National Historical Society Museum Director, Emil Guillermo. And once again, I thank you for your time. You can email me at emilamok, EMILAMOK @gmail.com. Thank you very much for being with me and sharing this moment with you, my gong, in my closet. Stay safe, stay healthy. Let's be happy this weekend. I'm Emil, and as my friend, the late Professor Don would have said, mahals and salamats.